Okay, then without further ado, I call upon the first speaker of the side proposition to give their speech and open this debate for today. Here.
Hello, my pronouns are she, her, and I'll be taking verbal PLIs. Thank you. Okay, my speech begins in three, two. When we start measuring joy, we stop feeling it. On proposition, we regret the rise and overdominance of hobby quantification apps as the primary platform where all social comparisons undoubtedly grow. Simple framing for this one. Okay, what does regret mean for proposition? We're evaluating whether the rise of hobby quantification apps have unintentionally forced pressure onto people with hobbies. And what do hobbies mean? Hobbies exist to provide intrinsic and natural joy, creativity, and personal meaning. They're the everyday enjoyments for people. They're supposed to be the escape for everyone after a long day. So when hobbies are quantified, ranked, and publicly displayed, they stop being leisure and start becoming a performance, a competition, the exact society we as proposition are trying to stay far away from. So what do hobby quantification apps or HQA look like? Apps with a lot of credibility and accessibility. They cater to a large audience and are often seen as reliable. People often go to these apps to look for book reviews or song popularity. So obviously these apps have massive influence on public opinion and social norms and popular hobbies. These apps are centered around numbers and rankings. They don't just include opinions and thought. They also quantify people and give their hobbies a rank, a place. This means that they're much worse than any other online community, even though they might have some hate too. Because at the end of the day, it's not just opinions and comments again, it's an actual number, an actual value that people can compare easily with each other. This looks like movie rankings with numbers of stars, one star, one sentence book reviews, rankings of different musicians. These are very surface level and essentially supports the narrative of judging a book by its cover because it's so shallow. Our alternative looks like without the rise of this, hobby discussion settings would be real life communities, right? This looks like book clubs, right? This also looks like communities, right? On Reddit or TikTok, where even if comparison culture and hate still exists, it's always better because there's still opinions.
Point
They
of
aren't numbers
information.
that people can compare. No, thank you, ma'am. We regret a world where people engage in art primarily to optimize numbers, social validation, or algorithms. Okay. We regret a world where people engage in art primarily to optimize numbers and social validation rather than enjoyment. I'll take that POI.
Why is it the majority of people care about the numbers rather than just tracking their progress?
Okay, I'll actually mention that in my second substantive. So I'm gonna move on to my first substantive on why people are able to enjoy their hobbies more freely on our side, right? But first, layer, in what's happening in the status quo, right? Let's characterize what the world looks like by first giving an example by yours truly, right? So currently, many people, myself included, first started using platforms like Spotify, GoodReads, simply to, find my favorite songs to stream. But after Spotify Wraps start first to right, there's then the nagging sensation in me to maintain my top streak, right, of 0.1% listener of blah 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 artists, right? So with public and shareable stats and algorithm boost and public profiles, people then feel watched. They curate taste for social approval. Hobbies then become displays. Why is the case for this? Simple max for this, right? What are the intentions of people? Let's ask ourselves this, right? People, although maybe not intentionally, want to conform to social norms. They want to see reviews to see if their preferences are normal. People want to see similar novels or shows to the ones they like. So my top list artist is some niche J-pop artist. My worry is if I post this, will people think I'm weird for liking them? If I see the book I really like have tons of one-star reviews on Goodreads, is there more pressure for me to wonder, hey, is this book really bad? Am I really weird for liking this? Second layer on why we regret that and how on our counterfactual people enjoy their hobbies more freely, right? There's no external metrics, right? No imposed standard of good enjoyment. In a world with quantification apps, hobbies are not reduced to numbers, such as counts, streaks, rankings. There's no objective benchmark for how fast, how much, and how well one should engage in a hobby. Enjoyment is guided by internal satisfaction, not external validation, right? The key link to this is that when nothing is being measured, there's nothing to optimize on, right? Without metric-driven trends, people explore based on curiosity, not popularity. And niche genres of real communities will thrive, like what was happening before the rise of HQAs, right? So, second substantive on comparison culture that rises along with the rise of HQAs, right? Layer one to this is the hobby quantification apps provide specific numbers that represent your dedication to your hobby and how good the specific artist, author, hobby you like is Simple max for this, right? Comparison culture is a modern phenomenon where individuals habitually measure their lives' achievements and self-worth against the curated highlights of other people, primarily fueled by social platforms like HQAs, right? This relentless comparison breeds in anxiety, low self-esteem, and the fear of missing out, FOMO, leading to a persistent feeling of inadequacy. This can lead to comparison with other people about how dedicated you are, or if like someone ranks like top 5%, well, I'm top 0.1% of this artist, right? Comparison is just human nature. It's natural to compare yourself to others when others are sharing their scores, right? It's inherent nature that people want to prove themselves. So the earlier POI on why people would want to compare is simple. These apps encourage that. These apps have they offer you the option to compare that, right? So the second layer on this is that it leads people to being less motivated and more discouraged in their hobbies, right? By comparing numbers and statistics, it becomes a race or competition to be the most devout listener, to read the most books by an author, right? People stop caring about their hobbies and start caring more about their numbers and statistics. Why? Because I've shown again, social comparison, right? People stop enjoying their hobbies. Since they focus on numbers, it becomes an ongoing cycle improving their stats rather than focusing on their hobbies, right? So on proposition, we stand firmly against the rise at HQAs. Why? Because we are in favor of real life communities which already existed before the rise of HQAs, right? In favor for freedom in hobbies, approved by my first substantive, and in favor for standing against comparison culture. Let's clarify again what the burden on proposition is. We don't have to prove that HQAs have zero benefit. We don't have to prove that we hate HQAs. We just have to prove that the overdominance of HQAs being the tell of, hey, being the tell of your hobby, whether you enjoy it as much, is simply not the way to go, right? And because of that, I'm so proud to stand with side opposition proposition, sorry.
Okay, I thank the first speaker of the proposition side for that speech. We'll now move on to first speaker of opposition. Here.
Yeah.
Ensuring ensuring that I'm audible and visible.
Yep.
Okay. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, life is busy. As a student or as an adult, you leave school and work at 6 p.m. and you have often less than enough time to partake in your chosen hobby. Should you waste that time scrolling on social media until you hit a recommendation, go to a bookshop with that limited time when really you're so tired, or would rather use that time to go on a dedicated app, find what you want, and you can enjoy your hobby as soon as possible. And this is the world that we prefer, right? Proud to oppose. First, I would like to call them out, right? Because they never do the extra legwork to tell us how their real life interaction works, which is their entire counterfactual. And we see that if you like a niche J-pop artist and people find you weird, it is unclear how on their side people will not judge you for it. So now moving on to the rebuttals for the house today. So they said that hobby quantification becomes performative because your numbers and rankings can be compared. Quantification leads to shallow discussions and people innately want validation. But we see that this is not true because we think that individuals do not act performatively for your numbers and rankings because they're literally once a year. And this pressure does not exist if your interactions solely exist on the basis once a year numbers and rankings, those interactions are superficial and doomed to fail anyways. We see that it is torture for people to pursue what they do not like. They don't have an incentive for them to partake in this kind of thing just for the competition. It's very unlikely that people will force themselves to go through the torture listening to artists that they don't like to just to have a good profile. That is just not good enough. That we don't see that it's a good enough incentive to spend your time on a hobby that you don't feel like you genuinely want and connect to. And we think that this shallow discussion will also not happen because my second speaker will elaborate on this in her substantive. We think that call-out culture exists because it literally calls out people who are performative, right? So that people are not incentivized to do so. And this sort of like shallow validation does not affect people that much because as mentioned, it's literally once a year. But we see that even if they do become performative or they are performative on their like apps, we don't see how this actually negatively affects everyone else. If someone is being performative, it's just them building up the profile that they desire. It doesn't affect how everyone else can access and use these apps. There's bound to be people using the apps for the purpose of actually trying to find people who have the same interests or to look for things they actually want to develop in their hobbies, right? But we also want to flip this argument. Their whole reason of performative kills their alternatives of social media because the whole term and concept of performative exists on social media. We tell you that the culture of hobby quantification apps are different, which my second speaker will also elaborate on. Their whole book club thing is much more unlikely because digitalization of society exists and people don't have the time to meet up with others. This is also problematic because when people can't meet others outside their community as easily because of face-to-face barriers. Okay, so now onto my stance. We think that status quo is fine as it is, that there's no problem with the rise of hobby quantification apps. In fact, we see that when more people are actually engaged into these apps, are they able to gain easier accessibility, convenience, and build meaningful communities. So my first substantive of the day is how our site provides convenience for people to explore their hobbies. On Proposition's world, without people using these apps, we see that there's already limited pastime for people to pursue their hobbies and enjoy doing what they like, right? They make this problem far worse because more of this precious time will be wasted in Proposition's world finding your next read or watch when you don't even have a platform dedicated to your hobby. You're rummaged through endless generalized lists, not something suited for your specific interest. People waste time finding something that they genuinely like, which is hidden in the intricacies of the media. When you get recommended something that does not interest you, you also waste time on it, which could otherwise be saved when you watch, read, or listen to something that you have actually loved from the start already. This changes when you use dedicated quantification apps, right? Because this benefit is unique because these recommendations are curated for you and yourself only. You are more likely to enjoy it. However, the rise of hobby quantification apps, we see that it makes it easier for people to find the things that they like. Two reasons for this. One, hobby quantification apps are uniquely and specifically designed for the convenience of the user. Apps like GoodReads and Letterboxd have a section where you can see the books and movies that others have liked. If you see the profile of a book or movie that you liked, you can find similar books on the apps itself. Not only that, you can also read other people's reviews of the book and you can find synopses of the books or movies by the creators themselves. It can tell you the accurate genre of books. So this makes it far easier for people to find the things that they like, right? With actual established information that a specific app draws from, this gets you more tailored and less vague suggestions, which we think is beneficial to the user for its time-saving capabilities. As a result, this allows people to maximize their time better. Our second reason is digitalized. So these apps are online, right? They are on your phone, which makes it easier for you to access. Instead of going to the library and spending time browsing through books for a long time or watching movies that you don't really enjoy to find something you like, for example, Goodreads and Letterboxd, they actually allow you to find something that you like in a significantly shorter time. And even if their alternative is social media, we see that social media discourse is uniquely negative and detrimental to the community, which my second speaker will elaborate on in her substantive. So what is the impact of today's debate? Is that hobbies are something that people treasure and hold close to their heart, right? We tell you that it's a temporary relief from the busy nature of everyday life. Imagine every day you have to go to school, you have to work, and then when you come back, you have such limited that small few hours before you go to bed, before you can to develop your hobby, and it forms a huge part of your identity and is sacred to all of us. The time that you dedicate to your hobbies is a time where you can genuinely relax and derive enjoyment from. We see that without these hobby quantification apps, we limit people's valuable time and deprive them of some of this enjoyment. And as such, we limit the happiness that people get to derive from it. We believe that maximizing the sacred time people get to enjoy their hobbies is something that is so inherently crucial, which is something the hobby quantification apps do best. So proud to oppose.
I thank the first speaker of the opposition for that speech. We'll now move on to the second speaker of side proposition. Here.
I prefer verbal rebuttals, and I will begin my main. Verbal PI. Sorry, and I will begin in 3, 2, 1. Hobby qualification apps do not just reflect people's interests. They structurally disadvantage niche communities, making them less visible, less shared, and less likely to develop into sustainable actual communities. As a result, society will become more mainstream, with non-mainstream art, media, and subcultures completely getting buried under metrics that overall reward popularity over meaning. So overall, in my speech, I'll go over some housekeeping rebuttals, then I'll explain how hobby qualification apps actually do bury niche communities and prevent communities from forming in the first place. and what both worlds look like in this situation. Then I'll move on to show how these apps actually erode authentic engagement in the depth instead they only promote basic numbers and unpromote the depths of actual artistic understanding. Finally, I'll explain why offline discovery and community spaces actually protect these values better and why the harms of qualification are structural and actually long-term. So firstly, I'll begin with some housekeeping and clarifications. So we are not actually arguing that qualification apps are useless or that some people cannot discover content online. We are instead arguing that the rise has structural consequences. Overall, they privilege mainstream content and push people to follow metrics instead of personal taste. This directly counters proposition's points of having people spend less time finding their own hobbies, because that only applies to people who have really mainstream hobbies. What if you like artists that aren't really known? What if you don't follow like the mainstream artists like Taylor Swift or Sabrina Carpenter? Without those mainstream hobbies, you'll actually spend more time looking for your own communities because they are being pushed down. Overall, this prevents niche cultures from surviving or growing. Secondly, we have to clarify that cultural diversity is uniquely fragile and that mainstream culture will always survive while niche cultures require protection to exist at all. Quantification will overall disproportionately harm the most vulnerable cultural forms. Even if a few individuals benefit from easier discovery, society will lose entire cultural ecosystems. Once buried niche cultures are extremely, extremely difficult to actually revive. So then next I'll move on to some rebuttals. Firstly, we need to clarify that the main incentive of companies is to earn money. They will rank people and define people with numbers so that they can earn profit. This is the reason that mainstream culture is so pushed forward. They know that numbers and rankings and competition will incentivize people to be competitive so that they can rack up more views and they can rack up more streams. This is why these apps are already structurally engineered to be competitive, to force people to compete forward. This is why proposition cannot argue that people will just decide to go on these apps and choose to only explore their own hobbies, because they will be forced. These types of mainstream hobbies will be pushed towards them. They will incentivize people to join these mainstream hobbies and pressure them. And the main purpose of these rankings overall is to profit these big companies. It's just a marketing strategy that is built to bait these individuals. Secondly, on opposition's point that people will also judge you in real life, that was one of their POIs, but we have to agree that this is incredibly unlikely to do, because being anonymous online allows people to judge freely without fear. And this is much less likely to happen in real life, because in real life, you choose your community, you choose the circles that you're in. You are not being pushed towards, you don't get this huge flow of information from culture, from people, from communities that you do not relate to and you do not agree with. So I think that discredits their point of people also judging you in real life. Next, proposition also may argue that these apps will help people discover niche content, but while they may show some niche items, algorithms overall prioritize scale, not significance. So the most truly niche communities will eventually remain invisible. They might also argue that sharing metrics fosters community, but these communities are often shallow, competitive, or performative. Real engagement requires shared interest, not numbers and social comparison. So next I'll move on to my main substantive. So first I'll begin with explaining how this harm happens in their world. Firstly, popularity metrics will basically become equivalent to quality on their side. For example, star ratings, likes, follower counts, and the most popular things list will signal what is actually worth engaging for. These metrics are treated as indicators of quality, even though they only reflect popularity and scale. Secondly, algorithms will only amplify this scale and not actual significance, not actual quality. So they will only amplify the mainstream things that are already popular. They will not really care about niche communities that are just currently unpopular, and they'll further push them down and make them undiscoverable and inaccessible to new audiences. Yes?
Don't you think there are many other ways people can get like
I'm gonna move on from that. Sorry, I think you were lagging. I couldn't really hear carefully, so I'm going to move on. So next is that users will overall self-censor exploration. When people see these low ratings or reviews, they'll assume that the content is bad. They're going to fear wasting time or seem out of touch. This is a problem that only side proposition has, because this will lead to people stop trying niche content. They'll stop talking about it publicly. They'll stop building community around it just because their own hobby is not being represented on these actual apps and systems. So over time, entire genres, subcultures, artistic movements, they're going to be crowded out by mainstream alternatives. Niche communities will fail to gain visibility, fail to form communities, and eventually fail to survive. Now, how is this different on our side? So on our side, niche communities can survive without apps, without hobby qualification apps, through clubs, word of mouth, small subcultures that are built on shared interests rather than overall mass approval. Value is going to be determined by actual enjoyment, meaning, identity, not just star ratings or follower counts or popularity counts. People will feel freer to explore their own niche interests. They'll be able to create content and engage with communities. For example, Reddit forums or Discord groups that allow users to engage deeply with content and with others who actually do share their interests, where nobody is judged by merely numbers, and communities form organically around shared values rather than mass appeal and popularity. The impact of this is a gradual but systemic erosion of cultural diversity. Niche cultures in a current world will fail to gain visibility. They'll fail to form communities, and eventually they will fail to survive. This leads to fewer experimental genres, fewer minority voices, fewer unconventional forms of expression. Overall, loss is not merely about taste. It is about the disappearance of entire cultural ecosystem that rely on small but committed communities to exist. In conclusion, hobby qualification apps don't just track what people enjoy. They decide which cultures are visible and which are buried. By privileging popularity over meaning, they prevent niche communities from forming entirely. They reduce engagement with complex and experimental media and systemically erode cultural diversity. Offline spaces, clubs, and small communities, by contrast, will actually protect these fragile cultures and allow art to be appreciated for the actual depth, identity, and meaning. For these reasons, we must regret the rise of hobby quantification apps. They are a structural threat to the survival of niche cultures and the richness of our original shared cultural landscape. Hobby quantification apps don't just measure culture, they decide which cultures are allowed to exist, and we cannot allow this to happen. For all these reasons, I'm so proud.
I thank the second speaker of side proposition for their speech. I now call upon the second speaker of side opposition to give their speech. Here.
Hi, can I check that I'm audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, with that, I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, your identity is shaped by the people around you. In the physical space and the meta space, you are shaped by a community. In today's growing individualistic society, it is ever more important that you keep your community alive. That is why we support the rise of hobby quantification, proud to oppose. Some call-outs for the House today. I'm not sure what they were saying at the start of their speech, where there's anonymity on their side, which makes it impossible for people to get judged. But we tell you on hobby quantification apps, these benefits are symmetric. You can also have choices to stay anonymous. You can have a different username, so I'm not sure what they are trying to go about there. And secondly, how exactly will people find other niche artists when you are doing it face-to-face? Like, how do you find when you interact with so little people, like face-to-face, compared to online and in hobby quantification apps that are intended for you to find other people with similar interests? And the toxic discourse that is assert happens on our hobby qualification apps. If I take it at best, it also exists on the online platforms that they talk about. The trends and like all the hate also exists. My rebuttals will be integrated. Now my sub one on how the rise exclusively allows for more communities and groups to form over media. We don't think that being performative is a big enough issue to deprive others of this community. So first of all, from my premise, the nature of users and the app itself. We think that people use it to express themselves and their interest in their movies and music, etc. The app itself allows them to key in their interest to get results that are specific to them. These results include others who have similar taste to them and what others think that they might like. This goes against their algorithm argument. The whole app, the way the app is structured is to give you results that are specific to your interests, that align with your interests and not mainstream media. And even people who like niche artists are inclined to key in their details because of their own personal tracking, right? These apps often allow people to choose whether they want to remain private or not, because at the end of the day, it's what you intend to use the hobby qualification app for. If you intend to use it for your personal tracking, maybe you don't wish to share your interests publicly, that's okay. Who's going to find your profile and talk bad about your J-pop artist? It's like your choice whether or not you want to interact with others. We tell you slowly but surely, with the rise, we exclusively solve this problem because more people also share the same niche interest online. And we think that people also use it to share their opinions if they feel very passionate about the book, or people use it to genuinely block out the noise on social media and all the mindless hate on different artists and artists without like real constructive criticism and calling other people performative, right? They go to this exclusive space to have a real dialogue on whether the book is good or not. The nature of the platform itself makes it very hard for people to hate on and judge others for a few reasons. This goes against their claims. Number one, most people who use the app are those who actually read the book itself and have interest, which is why they go out of their way to get a whole new app to discuss about it. We think that this is why they're more likely to give very real and genuine opinions on the book. Secondly, it's very easy to distinguish what is constructive and what is unnecessary because of the nature of the app. To have a good dialogue of the media, people who hear absurd comments, they often try to find out why they made that comment. Like, I'm trying to find out like real reasons why you don't like this book. And if the person fails to give real reasons on their negativity, all they can say about their hate about the J-pop artist is that, oh, I just don't like things. 1 second. I think it makes it very easy to ignore this hate and not let it get to you. I'll take your POI.
If people hate by leaving bad ratings, like 1-star comments on an actual forum, how would you be able to distinguish which people actually have reasons for disliking and which people actually just do dislike it?
Again, as I said, if you give something that doesn't sound legitimate, people are more likely to ask you why, because they're trying to get a meaningful discussion out of it, compared to social media where you can easily get away with it and ignore that comment. And also, thirdly, mechanisms on the platform don't allow for it. You gain legitimacy by writing reviews and getting feedback on your reviews, and they're directly associated to your profile. Thus, people who are haters already get less interaction. Okay, social media doesn't reward you for constructive feedback the same way that these platforms do. It is because of the inherent culture of the app that it does not tolerate the same childish and hateful behavior on social media that their alternative likely is. Okay, now my mechanism. When people share their interests on these apps, they find others who have the same interests. They become incentivized to reach out to them to discuss new updates about the media, to share their joy about their favorite songs. It is precisely this accessibility that you cannot find in other alternatives where content is diluted with the mainstream media, which is something that they talked about. But the mechanisms of this app directly tells you who also likes this, who also likes that, and it even categorizes you into a community itself, like Spotify Rap when they tell you what club you are from. This is problematic because on their side, people lose out on finding a community that can make their interests feel validated and feel seen. The rise is particularly important because you get more people joining these apps, keying in their data and their interests. What are the impacts here? When there are a significant amount of people utilizing these apps, you have more data to match with more people. There are more people who key in their interests. There's a higher chance that you're able to find someone who actually has the same niche interest as you. This directly goes against their point that people can't find others on our side. It becomes less likely to pressurize you to be mainstream when there's a variety of hobbies that exist on our app. Why is this important? Because it helps you gain your intended outcome when you download the app, to find more things to read that are similar to what you like. You have more people who share their interests, and you get like a more effective outcome here. And the rise of it brings people into the app because more people become curious. Why are there people posting their Spotify Rap, their Letterboxd? They become interested to know more about their interests and to know more about who they are as a person, what type of listener they are, and what club they are part of. This is important for 3 reasons. First of all, you gain a better sense of identity when you feel a connection to the media that you consume. This allows you to better appreciate the media with the community that you have formed over it and all the happy discussions that you have formed, like you have bonded with other people over it. Number 2, users that encourage you to keep staying in your hobby because they make sure that your journey is not stagnant, because you find so much joy in your hobby. Now that you can discuss it with others, you feel seen and you have meaningful conversations over it. Your community likewise will encourage you to read more and to stay invested in this hobby that brings you so much joy. And thirdly, more people joining the community means more people feeling welcome, more people wanting to read more books, and more people wanting to appreciate the media and have a meaningful dialogue over it. And also because inherently people want to feel seen, people want to feel happy when they can talk about their joy and maximize their enjoyment of their hobby and to have a community and social bonds. For that, I've never been prouder to oppose.
I thank the second opposition speaker for that speech. We'll now move on to the third speaker of side proposition to end the main speeches for side prop. Here.
Hi, am I audible and visible?
Yep.
Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay, I'll start with session 3, 2, 1. Side opposition supports a world without choice and where the only form of culture is supported by toxic comparisons so proud to propose. a key piece of reframing that I can just do at the start of my speech, right? Now, side opposition tries to claim that our alternative is just completely unrealistic, right? They tell you that in this digitalized world, book clubs and groups of friends just simply don't exist. However, this is just complete straw man, right? Yes, this is what we're regretting because the rise of HQAs is what destroyed all of these real life communities, right? However, in real life, there are actually so many ways to actually create these communities in the status quo, right? It's not unrealistic to find one. For example, in real life communities, you can just put your friend on to your favorite singer and make a community yourself around a group of friends. Or you can just go onto Reddit and essentially just find people who like what you like, right? What's the delta here? On Reddit, your taste is not ranked, which means that people are a lot more supportive, right? Ultimately, this is just so much more accessible than HQA communities, in which like all these niche communities are essentially flamed for being so niche and not being mainstream, right? What does this mean? Nobody is willing to take the first step and make the community because it's always so toxic, right? Everyone is too scared to take the first step, and that means these communities for niche topics simply don't exist in their world, right? The next piece of rebuttal that I tell you is that all people in our alternatives will also judge niche choices. However, our first speaker literally said this in our framing and rebutted this immediately, right? Ultimately, there are five mechanisms as to why this is simply not true, right? First, this idea that you surround yourself with similar people in real life scenarios, right? For example, a school club for some niche thing, right? So why would they be flaming you when they agree with you, when they have the same views, right? Second, there's a lot less toxicity because there's less anonymity, right? In this world, there's a lot more accountability for what you say, and people aren't just going to start like being mean to you simply because you like a certain J-pop artist, right? Third, there's less quantification of popularity. For example, 100 likes on a review hating on your favorite book versus a couple people saying that they aren't the biggest fan of that book, right? Fourth, it's a much closer community, because there are real connections with people, so there's no reason for them to be so mean. And then five, at the very least, in our worst case scenario of things like Reddit communities, they don't judge you because there's no quantification of popularity, right? That's why our alternatives are always better than their best case scenario. That's why we just completely win this debate from reframing. Okay, onto the three main clashes in this debate. First, on this idea of convenience, right? This is the main opposition push, but I'd just like to quickly point out the tiny impact this has on the debate, right? They try to claim that life is busy and it's just very hard to find good recommendations. However, this just doesn't make sense because the whole point of a hobby is to essentially devote time towards it, right? If you are truly too busy to find good recommendations, then how can you be not busy enough to actually read the book that was recommended to you? It just doesn't make sense, and it's just a complete straw man, right? So, however, this also doesn't work for niche topics, which we already said are just completely buried in the status quo, right? In these HQAs, the only things that are represented, the only things that are actually upvoted by the algorithm are the more mainstream topics. And that's why this just doesn't work for niche topics, which is our entire case. So this is just also a complete straw man. However, third, in our communities, we also get people who give good recommendations, right? This is just because these people don't only like this niche artist, right? They also like other people, and because these other people on their side are so much more mainstream, it's very easy to be exposed to them on our side of the house. So we believe that not only is this just a complete straw man, it's also a complete there's complete symmetry between both sides, right? However, just quickly note that this is just a tiny impact in this debate because it just doesn't make sense. Okay. Second, on this idea that people enjoy their hobbies, right? Now, side opposition's main rebuttal to this is this idea of a performative person, right? They're not going to do it because they only get to rank themselves once a year. However, this really only applies to Spotify Wrapped. This just doesn't make sense, right? They also tell you that nobody would torture themselves to pursue what they don't like. However, this is not about acting performative, as we already said, right? This is about people being afraid to enjoy what they like, so they only listen to mainstream music, right? This is not about being performative. This is about being too scared to do what you actually enjoy, right? The next thing they tell you is that there's going to be a call-out culture for being performative. However, this just doesn't make sense because why would people call each other out for liking mainstream music when they like the same mainstream music themselves, right? There's no analysis for this. And not only that, how would people differentiate some people from being performative and some people from actually liking the mainstream artist, right? It just doesn't make sense. And then finally, what will happen on their side is that people will call out niche topics because these niche topics are the ones that aren't represented in the status quo, and those are the ones that are going to be flamed, and that's why they get buried on their side of the house, right? Okay. Then side opposition tries to tell you that people will essentially ask online, why is this 1 star when they see a when they see a bad review on GoodReads, right? However, this is just complete straw man because instead of doing that, you would just simply scroll past, or you wouldn't see it in the first place because the algorithm only promotes things with high reviews, right? This just doesn't happen in the status quo, right? Okay, and then finally, note that our entire point on comparison culture was completely dropped by opposition, right? Why is this so important? Because comparison culture is what stops people from reading to enjoy it, right? They only do it for the numbers, and that's why it's so harmful on their side. There's an active pressure to keep conforming and keep doing and keep reading, even though you don't actually like reading or you don't like reading the kind of books they are currently reading. And this is so harmful because it prevents people from actually enjoying their hobbies, and it makes them actually stop enjoying their hobbies and stop doing it in the future. And then finally, on the third clash on pop culture diversification, note that side opposition has no response to this. However, we already told you that there's a lot more diversification of pop culture because on our side, we have real communities who are actively supporting each other and actively supporting niche topics. And that means that pop culture is able to essentially promote a lot of these niche topics. That's why we are so proud to propose.
Okay, I think the speaker of side proposition for that speech. We'll now move on to the final main speech of this debate. Opposition third speaker, you may now take the floor.
Can I check that I'm audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, if so, I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, the problem you get with proposition's case is that they are entirely contingent on the fact that people are performative, that people are going to force themselves to fit into societal norms. If we are able to disprove this claim, we win this entire debate. First of all, they said that they can use face-to-face clubs like Reddits to find niche interests who won't hate on you. But this is not true. Face-to-face clubs is impractical because why are there just clubs targeting these niche artists if it's not already popular? I think what is more likely to happen is people are going to ask individuals one by one if they know they're J-pop artists, and they're going to feel more dejected and odd after being told over and over again that they don't know who this J-pop artist is. Even if they can use Reddit instead, the same hate exists on their side because it is social media that causes you to internalize that niche is bad and they will hate on you on Reddit. We think that it's much more convenient and efficient to find every user on the database with the same interest as you so they can save time and find a book and start reading it. We think that the same niche communities exist on our side, except it is much easier to find and access and be welcomed into it because the hobby quantification app is really a no tolerance for hate type of culture. I have a few callouts and clarifications. First, you said that the rise has consequences. This is not a sufficient reason to entirely regret this rise. The rise also makes it more convenient. It helps people connect with each other and form a community. They're open to the benefits as well. Second, people naturally want to seek external validation. That's what we heard from proposition. But this is a metric harm. The scale at which these apps produce this toxic culture is limited. If people aren't going to be affected by social pressure, there are many other ways they can receive this harm. This is not something that is unique to our side. Third, look, their entire counterfactual is very unclear and shaky. On one hand, they tell us they prefer people to be interacting in real life, which foster better relationships, but on another, they say that their side, people can use social forums to engage with one another. They keep harping about how they can get our benefits on Reddit and other social forums, but we've already told you very clearly in LO that the difference between these apps and their side is the convenience when you can easily find everything in one app, which is important because people are busy to look through everything. This brings me to my first clash on which side better characterizes how people are likely to react to the rise of hobby quantification apps. They told you that hobby quantification apps become performative because your numbers and rankings can be compared, quantifications lead to shallow discussions, and people innately want validation. We think that individuals actually have a very limited time and use their limited time to engage with online communities and discussions that actually benefit them. They're going to use these numbers and rankings to hold surface-level discussions, but use these platforms not annually, but for deep discussions on a more regular basis. Let's engage with propositions in best case, and let's be charitable and assume that there's a group of people who are going to be performative and fake their interests to seek external validation. Why is this not a sufficient reason to entirely regret this rise? We think that this affects a very minority of people. My previous speakers have proven how important hobbies are for a person. It is a great part of her identity, and the people who are going to fake their interests just to fit societal norms are going to be a huge minority. It is torturous to listen to a J-pop artist you don't like because people don't have an incentive to do this. They want to focus on the hobbies they actually like, given how limited this time is, and it's something that's sacred and an escape from the busyness of real life. It does not erase the benefits we have, which help a greater scale of people. Even if there are people who are performative, there is equal, if not even more people who are genuinely using these apps because they want to track their hobbies. They want to form a community. These people are far more important at the end of the day because they're the majority of people who are going to sign up for these apps in the first place. For these people, these apps are the only way they can get identity, which Prop thinks is so important. Their comparative is insufficient at best and unfeasible in general. Before I move on to my second clash, are there any POIs? Okay, I'll begin my
How is it
speech.
being performative if you're simply too scared to speak out and do what you like?
I don't think that people are going to feel scared to speak up for what they like, given how important a hobby is to a person's identity. They're going to speak up when people are going to go against them. I think they're going to be offended. On to my second clash on which better helps people pursue their hobbies. What did we tell you in this debate? We say that we help niche communities because someone can create an app for a niche topic and network in relation to this niche hobby, or they can create a subgroup on these hobby quantification apps like GoodReads, which has a community made of people who read historical romantasy. And this is a niche community that isn't going to be dying out on our side, just becoming a subgroup on these apps who have apps dedicated to them. No, niche hobbies will literally just create niche apps, like apps to share crochet patterns or apps like learning a specific interest. And all these apps exist and people are going to sign up for it because there's going to be demand. And so far as people do have niche hobbies, they have a desire to want to find people who like the same things as them. These apps are going to get buy-in and people are going to collectively join together and adopt these apps. Proposition comparative is real-life interaction. We told you that people's time is limited. Realistically, you don't have much time to go out of your way to find time outside your regular 9 to 5 to chase this real-life interaction. You want to go all into your hobby. You don't have the luxury of time to waste. This is a unique benefit to these digitalized platforms. This only happens when you build a community. The prerequisite of meaningful real-life interaction is when you find people who like the same things as you. They say that this harms niche cultures, but we think that these niche cultures are not going to exist when you don't find people who like the same things as you to begin with. We revive niche cultures with this comparative. We think that real-life interaction is just simply not possible. Now, I'm going to be weighing this on a scale of impact. Because these apps are uniquely designed and curated for people to explore what they like, they forge a community that the people do find the things that people who do like the same niche interests as them, and the gravity at which people are able to enjoy these interests is much larger. Instead of wasting your time chasing real-life interaction, which may not even exist, they can jump to explore their hobbies right away, anytime and everywhere. The unique nature that it is digitalized makes it much more convenient. This is something that they have not managed to engage with at all. We think that the most niche interests are already belonging to a large subgroup of people that can interact on these apps where we provide a platform to do so. Meanwhile, on their side, physical interaction and social forums don't provide niche communities because they are way harder to find and have an absence of proper tailored algorithms to help you find them. For all these reasons, so proud to oppose.
Okay, I thank the third speaker of the side of opposition. We'll now move on to the 2-minute break before we move on to reply speeches. So your 2 minutes will start now. Okay, can both teams return? We'll now move on to the reply speeches, starting with opposition reply.
I'm making sure that I'm audible and visible.
Yes, you are audible and visible.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel. Instead of talking about strawberry matcha that performative people drink, let's discuss the baseless accusations of straw manning that Proposition is accusing us of. Proposition has not even given you a clear counterfactual down the bench. Their first tells you about creating communities, while their second real interaction, and their third face-to-face interaction. Proud to oppose. 3 reasons why we win today's debate. First, we allow for people to best develop their hobbies. We see that when there is a rise in apps, there are more people sharing their opinions and reviews. This is so important because people can find more reviews and more substance with the rise. This is what allows people to find similar interests. It's a cycle where everyone benefits. They never engage with the fact that convenience is so important to people, which is a big reason why the rise is beneficial for the average person. They tell us that what they want they want face-to-face interactions, but they never explain how this is more important to people as compared to convenience. Second reason why we win is that we build better communities. On Proposition side, they tell you that face-to-face clubs and Reddit allows for people to form niche communities. But we tell you that so many mechanisms make that untrue and make that very hard, especially with people who are so busy. But even if we did take them at their best, we've already proven to you how it is so much more efficient to be able to use a hobby quantification app, an app focused on forming those communities. It can become so much more convenient and faster, which is incredibly important when people are already so busy in their lives and just want to know what book, movie, or song is even worth their time. We tell you that more people become interested and invested in the media scene. When everyone is discussing various genres of music, there is a rise, which means more people discuss the media. This is so important because the media credits art and is dying in status quo. We need more people appreciating media, and we tell you that we get that faster and better when people can access more users, form more communities, and find personal connection with media when they can associate it with meaningful dialogues that they had with other users. It also keeps people invested in the art because there's a community actively encouraging them to keep reading, keep doing what they like, right? They don't need to cave and neglect their hobbies when work calls. The final reason why we win is that we tell you we allow for people to feel more seen. Niche interests are already so invisible in society, right? They don't trend on social media. They can't be seen through most mainstream media. The people who are part of these interests often feel like they don't have many people understanding them or that they don't really fit in with everyone else. But we think that with these apps, people are able to go into that one single hobby quantification app, easily see what others like and connect with them. They see that there are actually people in the world who like the same niche things as them, that they aren't alone. And that when they are able to build such a community with people of a similar interest, it fosters their sense of self, their sense of identity, right? They feel like they belong, they are in somewhere where they belong. And inherently that makes them so much more happier and so much safer when they share their interests with others. For all those reasons, so proud to oppose.
Okay, thank you for the opposition reply. We'll now move on to the final speech of this debate from proposition reply. Here.
Hello. Oh, can you turn your phone, your laptop volume? So, okay. Yeah. My speech will begin in 3, 2, 1. Opposition cannot have the cake and eat it at the same time. The moment they insisted on arguing against all our points without disproving the mechanism keeping them in place, they have already lost this debate. Firstly, Judge, most of their pushes come out in third. We would please ask you to please discredit that because it comes out in third. First, let's look at the biggest clash in this debate. What benefits the individual the most, right? So let's look at the case provided by the opposition first. People don't have enough time to find things and hobbies, so we waste time, right, on proposition. And they say that HQA's recommendation help people with this problem. HQAs are specifically for the convenience of the people, right? This is the entire case of Op1 speaker, right? It makes it easier for people to find the things they like and more tailored recommendation. And it allows people to maximize times, right? And it's digital, and digital is more accessible. Now let's take a look at what on prop we have proved to you, right? We have proved through societal pressures and innate human nature, people are pressured to fit themselves into the mold set by the trend. We have said in real life, you have the choice, right? This proven through our second speaker with our point, they're not really pushing actual content, they're just pushing popular content, right? The opposition has said no and has impacted out why niche communities matter, but they have no mechanization to prove that how they benefit niche communities, right? While we believe that we have sufficient proof of why this exists on our side. Their point on not enough time, their entire point on accessibility is again a complete score on contradiction as their own point, their own reply to why they have, we won't be as swayed by 1-star reviews because we have more time to investigate on why this review is true. So they all of a sudden have time again. This is a complete contradiction and a complete scroll. And please, we will ask you to discredit this, okay? Most of the mechs to their point is that people don't have time. And this entire case is based on that. So I would think that this point is very invalid, right? So let's weigh first, right? On proposition, we offer people the same benefits as opposition. Our arguments on social comparison and hobbies are more free on our side, brought up by our first speaker, was mainly dropped in unrebutted. Instead, they ran with my one-liner about a niche K-pop artist, J-pop artist, without addressing my arguments on mechs on why this is true. I think we gladly take this clash, as opposition has no real mechanisms onto some of the benefits they're pushing so hard and have no sufficient proof that their benefit is only exclusive on their side. Also, let's hear about the point brought up in third on how they're going to create niche apps for crochet patterns. First of all, this isn't included their FIA. They're arguing on HQAs, right? This is exactly what we're arguing for, right? We're arguing for community forums where like people can share their interests, right? That don't have ranks, they don't have numbers, they don't push people, right? So for this reason, they cannot have the cake and eat it at the same time, right? In our first speaker, their entire case rests on the point that performative people exist. However, throughout all three of our speakers, we have proven why society pressures these people to exist, and they've done nothing to disprove that. They've just resorted to performative people exist anyways. So therefore, if opposition insists on having the cake and eating it at the same time, that is simply impossible. And we would like to prove that the side proposition will take this debate today. Thank you.
Okay, I thank the proposition reply speaker for that speech. Yeah, I now request the teams to cross the house and shake hands after the debate. The judges will now retire to prep room 2.
Thank you.
to
Thank you for
cover.
the debate.
It was really fun, yeah.